Is Max Verstappen back to his best? Or was this magical lap at Suzuka a mirage amid Red Bull's technical chaos? Today we're going to take an in-depth look at how the four-time world champion achieved a pole position that no one, absolutely no one, saw coming. Stay until the end because we're not only going to break down how Max smashed the clock with a simply insane lap, but also why this qualifying session could mark a turning point in the battle between Red Bull and McLaren this season. And before we continue, leave me your comment. Do you think Max can win the championship with this unwieldy RB21? Or does McLaren already have the title secured? I want to read your theories. Suzuka isn't just another circuit on the Formula One calendar. For true fans of the sport, this track is considered a temple of precision, speed, and technique. Its figure-8 layout is unique, and its sequence of linked corners demands perfect synchronization between car and driver. It's a place where mistakes are unforgivable, and where the slightest misalignment in setup can mean a difference of half a second per lap. Here it's not the most powerful car that wins, but the most balanced, the most stable, and the one that allows the driver to attack with confidence from the first meter. And it's precisely this characteristic that makes Max Verstappen's performance in qualifying so spectacular. From the start of the weekend, everything pointed to clear McLaren dominance. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri had led every practice session, showing devastating consistency lap after lap. Their car seemed tailor-made for the demands of the Japanese track. Balanced, fast in corners, and extremely smooth on the tires, essential on a circuit where temperature management can define your pace from the second sector onwards. The RB21, in contrast, arrived with a completely different roadmap. An unstable base, extreme sensitivity to asphalt type, and erratic behavior in medium-speed corners. No one in the paddock, not even at Red Bull, expected a pole position here. But Formula One has a particular way of remembering why it's so unpredictable. Max Verstappen not only shattered expectations, but he did so on the most challenging stage, where Red Bull was supposed to have no advantage. Put this into perspective. He was coming off a start to the season far from his usual dominance. McLaren had won the previous two races, establishing itself as the team to beat. And while many expected the four-time world champion to start losing patience with a tricky car, he decided to respond on track. The fact that truly underlines the magnitude of this moment is that this was his first pole of the year. Yes, the same Max Verstappen who dominated in 2023 and 2024 hadn't finished first in qualifying for more than half a year. The last time he achieved it was in Austria last year. Furthermore, taking 4 consecutive pole positions at Suzuka is no coincidence. It's a testament to his personal mastery of one of the most technical circuits in the world. But what makes this performance truly special isn't just the statistic, but the context in which it occurs. Max did it against all odds, with a nervous car, in a team under pressure, and against a McLaren team that was performing at its highest level. Performances like these are what separate great drivers from legends. Because Suzuka is unforgiving. Because when everyone expected Verstappen to simply limit damage, he went and wrote another memorable chapter in his career. Not with power, not with mechanical superiority, but with sheer determination, surgical precision, and an understanding of the circuit that seems almost intuitive. This wasn't just a fast lap. It was a silent warning. A reminder that even on his worst days, Max can do the impossible. And that completely changes the landscape of the season. What happened in Q3 of the Japanese Grand Prix wasn't simply a good lap or another pole position for Max Verstappen. It was a performance that bordered on the unreal, a moment where time seemed to stand still and the entire paddock had to re-evaluate what they thought they knew about the current balance of power in Formula One. Gianpiero Lambiase, Verstappen's race engineer, called it an insane lap. And that's not an exaggeration to create drama. It's an accurate description of what was seen on track. Because when you look closely at the layout of that lap, the sectors, the stages, the breaking points, you understand that Verstappen didn't just push the limits, he completely erased them. The RB21 isn't a car that inspires confidence. It's nervous, especially at the rear. It tends to oversteer in critical areas, responding unpredictably when at its limit. And Suzuka, as we know, is a circuit that demands maximum lateral force and constant weight transition. It's not a place where you can hide your car's weaknesses. And yet, Max managed to hide them. In fact, he used them to his advantage. Where other drivers would ease off the throttle slightly for fear of losing control, he kept his foot down. Where others would correct the steering to avoid a spin, he simply adjusted the line down to the millimeter without losing a single thousandth of a second. In turns 7 and 8, part of Suzuka's legendary S's, Verstappen left everyone speechless. This was where he gained the most time over Norris and Piastri. Fast, linked corners where confidence in the car and reading the grip are everything. But he wasn't just fast, he was brave. He executed an aggressive line, taking advantage of every last inch of the curb, pushing the car's physical limits, as if he knew exactly how much instability he could endure before losing control. And then there's Spoon Corner, one of the track's most treacherous corners. There, Max himself admitted that he was simply hoping the car would stay on track. A phrase that says much more than it seems. It wasn't a perfect lap in the classic sense. It was a lap mastered through pure instinct, immediate reaction, and an almost irrational connection between driver and machine. Now, the most alarming thing for the rest of the grid isn't just that Max achieved this lap. What's worrying is the message he left with it. Because if Verstappen can do that with a car he still considers difficult to drive, then what can he do if Red Bull manages to solve even part of the RB21's problems? That's the real cliffhanger that lingered in the air after qualifying. And this is where the strategic dimension comes in. McLaren was on the rise with 2 consecutive victories, gaining confidence, building a narrative of progressive dominance. It seemed that, finally, someone had found the antidote to Red Bull's dominance. And just when everyone was beginning to wonder if the Verstappen era was ending, he responds with a performance that changes the tone of the conversation. Not with words, but with a lap that defies logic. What we witnessed at Suzuka wasn't just a pole position. It was an act of resilience. It was Verstappen raising his hand to say, "I'm still here. I still have more." And while the RB21 is far from the perfect car, as long as he's behind the wheel, no team can feel completely safe. Those thousandths of a second that separated him from the McLarens weren't just numbers. They were a silent scream. A warning to all those who thought they could start to forget about Red Bull this season. At first glance, what happened in qualifying for the Japanese Grand Prix could be interpreted as a single stroke of genius. A magical lap, a flash of pure talent that managed to hide the cracks in an unstable car. But to reduce what happened to a matter of luck would be to miss the true drama unfolding within Red Bull this season. Because the RB21 is nowhere near the dominant car many expected. And what's most worrying is that Max Verstappen has made it clear in every interview since the start of the year. This car isn't up to the task of maintaining its throne. The 4-time world champion hasn't hesitated to describe driving the RB21 as an extreme challenge, and even joked with brutal honesty that any other driver would crap themselves trying to drive it to the limit. This isn't an exaggeration. The car is showing signs of imbalance that go beyond what is usual in Formula One. It is extremely sensitive to multiple factors, from tire pressure to track temperature and curb type. Every slight alteration on the track seems to amplify the handling problems, generating a constant feeling of unpredictability. And in a sport where confidence in the car is essential to pushing to the limit, that unpredictability is a silent enemy. The updates Red Bull brought to Japan are a tacit acknowledgement that something isn't working. The engine cover was modified to improve cooling, the rear exhaust duct was enlarged, a solution specifically designed for Suzuka, and the rear wishbone design was tweaked to improve aerodynamic flow in key areas. It all sounds good on paper. But none of these modifications are revolutionary. They're more like temporary fixes. Attempts to contain the damage, not transform the RB21 into a winning machine. And that's what makes interpreting this pole position so complex. Because yes, Max did it. But he did so with a car that is still far from consistently competitive. Helmut Marko himself, known for not sugarcoating his words, has already issued a warning. Red Bull has 5 races to turn things around before the championship fight is out of reach. It's a statement that speaks of urgency, pressure, and also the internal awareness that technical supremacy is no longer a given. Now, this raises a critical question. Can Red Bull build a car that doesn't rely exclusively on Max Verstappen's supernatural talent? Because if the team needs its driver to perform in superhero mode every weekend to compensate for the car's shortcomings, then something's seriously wrong with the design and development process. And finally, there's the long-term perspective. Suzuka may have been a showdown, but it could also be a dangerous window into the future. If Red Bull fails to stabilize the RB21, and if the upcoming updates don't bring a clear improvement, Verstappen could find himself increasingly isolated in his attempt to sustain the team through sheer skill. And when a champion is forced to carry everything on his shoulders, the strain soon takes its toll. So no, this pole wasn't luck. It was the product of a driver at the limits of his capabilities, extracting more than the car can truly deliver. But that, on its own, isn't sustainable. And in that sense, Max's performance in Japan wasn't just brilliant. It was also a warning sign for everyone at Red Bull. Because if they don't react quickly, This season could slip through their fingers faster than it took Verstappen to complete that insane lap. What we witnessed at Suzuka can't be analyzed solely as a personal victory for Max Verstappen in a qualifying session. It's much more than that. It's a testament to how far a driver can go when the machinery isn't up to his abilities, and when the technical environment begins to crack under the pressure of a championship that no longer forgives mistakes or performance gaps. Because while McLaren is steadily advancing and Ferrari and Mercedes are trying to stay in the fight, Red Bull relies almost exclusively on a man who, once again, has demonstrated why he is considered one of the most extraordinary talents modern Formula One has ever seen. Today, we're not just talking about milliseconds. We're talking about pressure management, adaptation, and Verstappen's unique ability to reinvent himself even when everything seems against him. Suzuka gave us a historic lap, yes, but it also left us with uncomfortable questions. Is this performance sustainable with a car that continues to generate fundamental technical doubts? How much further can Verstappen continue to push the limits before the wear and tear physical, mental, and strategic becomes noticeable? And above all, are we witnessing the beginning of a comeback for the champion, or was it just a mirage brought on by a moment's brilliance in qualifying? McLaren remains a real, consistent threat and has made it clear that they're not just fighting for podiums, but for victories. The two previous victories were no fluke, and their drivers are performing at a very high level. Red Bull, on the other hand, is on shaky ground. Technical decisions are being made against the clock, changes to the driver lineup are generating internal noise, and the car still lacks a clear identity. And yet, amid all that chaos, Max worked his magic again. Which is impressive, yes, but also worrying. Because if Red Bull doesn't find stability in the development of the RB21, what is a pole today could be barely a top 5 finish tomorrow. And this is where you come in, those of you who follow Formula One with passion and analysis. What do you think of what Verstappen achieved at Suzuka? Was this a sign that there's still plenty of fighting to be done, or just a blip in a season that seems to be getting tougher for Red Bull? The comments are open, I want to know what you think. And if you enjoyed this in-depth analysis, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell.